March 6, 1944. At 23,000 feet over Germany, a B-17 bomber called Hell's Fury pushed into the heart of enemy airspace. In the tail position, Master Sergeant Michael, Man Mike, Donovan watched 12 Messerschmitt BF-109s line up for the attack. Official procedures said, "Return to your station and open fire only in defense." Training advised, "Conserve ammunition." Common sense suggested, "Stay alive." Donovan, however, had other ideas. Over the next 4 minutes, all 12 German fighters were neutralized, without a single American casualty. From that day on, every gunner in the 8th Air Force learned a new word: aggression. This is the story of how the seemingly suicidal tactic of a tail gunner rewrote the rules of aerial combat, how initiative could turn desperation into doctrine, and transform the most dangerous position on a B-17 into the most effective weapon in the sky. Michael Donovan grew up in South Boston, where surviving meant striking first and hitting hard. His father worked the docks, his older brother was a Golden Gloves boxer. Mike learned early that waiting meant taking damage, acting meant staying alive. By 17 he had already fought 32 street fights, 128 rounds for losses. The difference was starting early. After Pearl Harbor, Donovan enlisted in the Army Air Forces. They wanted him on the ground crew, but he insisted on gunnery school. The instructor judged him too aggressive, too reckless, too willing to expose himself to enemy fire. Donovan's answer, later legendary, was, "Dead gunners don't shoot. The living ones do." He graduated third in his class, not for precision but for speed. He could spot and lock onto targets faster than anyone else. His principle was simple: don't wait for fighters to enter the firing zone, face them first. In March 1944, Donovan was assigned to the 390th Bombardment Group in Framlingham, England. His B-17, Hell's Fury, had already flown 3 missions, 2 of which had nearly ended in disaster due to German fighters. The previous tail gunner, Sergeant Eddie Morrison, survived but requested a transfer, telling the crew chief, "That position is cursed. The next guy who goes in there dies." Donovan volunteered immediately. Captain James Whitmore, the aircraft's pilot, questioned him. "Do you know the statistics? The tail position has the highest mortality rate. 38% never finish their tour." "Then I've got a 62% chance," Donovan replied. "Why?" "Because I don't wait to be shot at. I shoot first." Whitmore stared at him, then nodded. "You're insane. You'll fit right in." On March 4, during the second mission, Donovan experimented again. When the BF-109s attacked from high 6 o'clock, he didn't track the leader, he tracked the wingman, the one who wasn't expecting fire and kept a predictable line. The wingman exploded, the leader, suddenly alone, broke off. The enemy attack unraveled. Crew Chief Sergeant Frank Murphy checked the ammo. "You fired 1,600 rounds out of a standard load of 2,000. 80% in one mission. And they didn't hit us," Donovan said. "I'd sign for that trade any day." But Donovan still wasn't satisfied. He had broken attacks and disrupted formations, but he hadn't maximized effectiveness. That night he studied enemy tactics, how they attacked, how they positioned themselves, what they expected. The Germans attacked in coordinated waves, 4 to 6 fighters stacked from high rear. The leader drew defensive fire, the wingman exploited the gunner's distraction. Americans reacted, Germans dictated. Initiative always belonged to the attacker. Donovan realized that by flipping the paradigm, everything could change. If he dictated the action, the enemy would have to react. On March 6, 1944, during the pre-mission briefing for Augsburg, 800 B-17s were in the air, with 2,500 German fighters expected. Whitmore warned, "It's going to be rough. Stay sharp. Stay alive." Donovan raised his hand. "Permission to try something different, sir." "Like what?" "Aggressive fire. I want to engage fighters before they begin their dive. Force them to defend before they attack." Whitmore frowned. "You'll burn through ammunition before the real fight. Or prevent the real fight." Donovan replied. Sir, we've been playing defense for 2 years. At this rate, 38% of tail gunners don't come back. Maybe it's time we stop waiting to get shot at. The pilot considered, then nodded. You've got one mission to prove it. If we get torn apart, I'm pulling you off the guns. Deal. With that unspoken agreement, Hell's Fury lifted off the runway at 6:47. The formation reassembled over East Anglia, then began the long climb. They crossed the English Channel without incident. At 8:24, they crossed the invisible border into German airspace. The mission was a well-worn routine, punctuated by maneuvers repeated until automatic. But at 9:19, habit gave way to real danger. High 6 o'clock bandits. 12 of them. Donovan spun his twin .50s into position. The 12 BF-109s were 2,000 yards out, perfectly aligned for a coordinated attack. Standard procedure dictated waiting for them to start the maneuver, then targeting the leader. Donovan ignored both rules. He opened fire immediately, at the maximum effective range, 2,000 yards. Tracers cut through the air, mostly falling hundreds of feet short of the targets, but hitting wasn't necessary to achieve the intended effect. The German formation shattered. The lead fighter veered right, the wingmen hesitated. Their attack pattern dissolved before it even began. Donovan, cease fire. Whitmore crackled. You're wasting ammunition. Negative, sir. Watch what happens now. The BF-109s reformed, but their demeanor had changed, no longer the usual aggressive dive, but a cautious, studying approach. Initiative was no longer German. When the new leader came within 1,500 yards, Donovan fired again, short, measured bursts, aimed not to shoot down but to intimidate. And it worked. The formation broke apart again. Only one fighter remained committed to the line, the left wingman. Aggressive, unhesitating, it was clear he was a veteran. He wouldn't be easily intimidated. He required a different approach. Donovan let him close. 1,400 yards. 1,200, the distance at which most gunners would begin sustained fire. He waited. 1,100. 1,000, until the target filled the sight. Then he fired. A single, furious burst, 200 rounds in 3 seconds. A wall of fire. The BF-109 tried to break away, but flew straight into the storm of tracers. The engine exploded. The plane disintegrated. Fragments spiraled toward the ground. Nice shot, murmured the radio operator. Donovan got one. Donovan said nothing. His sight was already on the next target. The remaining 11 had regrouped. Now they knew the tail wasn't a weak spot, it was a predator. They changed tactics, planning a multi-angle attack to overwhelm his attention. Donovan expected it. He anticipated it. When they split into 2 groups, 6 at 6 o'clock, 5 at 7 o'clock, he didn't try to cover both sectors. He focused only on the 6 at 6 o'clock. Laterals, you've got 7 o'clock, he radioed. I've got 6. Sergeants Tommy Price and Carl Johnson opened fire on the group approaching from the side. Donovan fixed on his sector. 6 diving fighters. He picked the leader. He fired. He hit. Explosion. The remaining 5 scattered for a moment, just enough time for Donovan to move to the new leader. He fired again. Hit again. Another explosion. In 30 seconds, 3 BF-109s were down. The 9 survivors retreated. Not to regroup. To run. From a single tail position. Donovan checked his ammo, 1,200 rounds spent, 800 remaining. Enough for another sustained engagement, maybe 2 quick bursts. The question was, would they come back? The answer came 15 minutes later. This time, 18. A full staffel. They had watched the first engagement. Now they were ready. They attacked from every direction, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. A deadly vortex closing on the bomber's tail. Standard response was to split fire, cover each sector, and hope. Donovan chose violence. He completely ignored the 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock fighters, leaving them to the lateral and belly gunners. He concentrated entirely on the 6 approaching from 6 o'clock. They dove on Hell's Fury. Donovan didn't wait, didn't hesitate, didn't try to evade. He aimed at the leader and opened fire at 1,200 yards, the maximum effective range of his twin .50s. Relative speed 400 knots. 7 seconds before the fighter could return fire. Donovan used every one of those 7 seconds. He guided the tracers along the BF-109s flight path. The fighter couldn't deviate without breaking formation. The pilot stayed on course. A fatal choice. At 800 yards, rounds hit. The canopy exploded. The plane flipped and plunged. 5 left. 400 yards. 3 seconds. Donovan shifted fire to the second. No time to track. Just instinct. He fired where the fighter would be 2 seconds later. And hit it. The engine exploded. Another fireball. The 3 survivors broke formation and withdrew. Holy Christ! Whitmore exclaimed over the intercom. He took down 2 more in 3 seconds. Donovan didn't answer. He was already reloading. Last belt, 400 rounds. And the mission was only halfway through. They still had to reach the target, drop their bombs, and then cross the same fighter-infested sky on the way back. Then came the surprise. They didn't attack. They simply escorted the formation, staying just outside machine gun range. They were waiting. Whitmore understood first. They're calling for reinforcements. We're about to get hit with everything they've got. He was right. 10 minutes later, radar picked up new contacts, 36 fighters, a full group. 3 mixed staffel of BF-109s and FW-190s. With the 12 already behind them, Hell's Fury now faced 48 enemy fighters. 1 single B-17 against a small army. Standard procedure. Request escort. Tighten the formation. Overlap defensive fire. Survive through coordination. But Hell's Fury, during the previous assaults, had drifted. The nearest Allied bomber was 3 miles away. No P-51s in the area. They were completely alone. Donovan checked the ammunition, 380 rounds against 48 fighters. A hopeless equation. Unless he changed the rules. Captain, he called over the intercom. Request permission to try something. What? Attack. Silence. Then Whitmore's steady voice. Explain. They're organizing for a simultaneous assault. In 2 minutes they'll hit us from every angle. We can't defend against that. But we can stop it. If I hit them while they're still coordinating, I can force them to scatter before they're ready. You'll be out of ammo in 30 seconds. Then I'll make those 30 seconds count. At 20-1 odds, defensive tactics don't work. Our only chance is a preemptive strike while they're vulnerable. 3 seconds of silence. Then the decision. Do it. And if you get us killed, I'll write your family the angriest letter they've ever read. Donovan didn't wait. The fighters were at 2,000 yards, still aligning. The leaders setting attack vectors, the tail elements taking position. A perfect window of vulnerability. Donovan opened fire. Not short bursts. Not suppressing fire. A full barrage. He dumped 200 rounds into the heart of the formation in 8 seconds. He wasn't aiming for a specific aircraft but for the space where coordination happened, where discipline kept the fighters tight. The effect was immediate. And devastating. Tracers sliced through the center of the formation. A BF-109 caught fire and fell. 2 more, trying to avoid the barrage, collided and crashed. Then chaos. The entire mass of 48 fighters dissolved. No order. No plan. Just isolated pilots trying to survive. Holy! Whitmore began, but there was no need to finish. Everyone saw what had happened. A single tail gunner had just shattered the largest enemy assault they had ever encountered. But Donovan knew the truth. He had bought time. Maybe 2 minutes. Maybe less. The Germans would regroup. Angrier. More determined. More lethal. And he had 180 rounds left. When they reorganized, they did so faster than expected, 90 seconds. This time there were no patterns. No coordination. Just a mass attack. 12 fighters from 6 o'clock, all at once. No tactical elegance. Just fury. Donovan chose his targets with surgical precision. Not the closest. Not the most threatening. But the psychological center of the swarm, the point where collective courage was born. 3 bursts of 30 rounds on 3 aircraft. All hit. 1 exploded. 2 veered off trailing smoke. The remaining 9 continued their charge, now at 400 yards. The sky erupted with 20mm cannon fire. Hell's Fury was hit, metal trembled, the entire structure groaned. Donovan didn't stop. Target. Burst. Target. Burst. Mechanical movements precise. Zero fear. Another BF-109 fell. Then another. 5 left. 200 yards. Almost point blank. Donovan could see their faces in the cockpits, young, cold, professional. He shot them anyway. 2 exploded. 3 remained. 100 yards. Too close. At that point, collision was a greater risk than combat. The survivors pulled back. Donovan lined up one last fighter. He pressed the trigger. Nothing. Empty guns. 180 rounds in 45 seconds. 6 fighters downed in that single engagement. Now he was defenseless. Out of ammo, Donovan reported. I'm dry. Copy, Whitmore replied. Damage? The crew checked. The belly turret hit, rudder cracked from stress. But the plane was flying. And they were all alive. Hell's Fury could still fight. But without a tail. And the Germans knew it. They reorganized for the final assault. 27 aircraft remained. They had lost 21 against a single tail position. An unsustainable loss, but now they had the advantage. The tail was silent. They attacked from the rear, low 6 o'clock. The only direction Donovan could no longer defend. They advanced in tight, methodical formation. No waste. What was about to happen had nothing of offensive maneuvering. It looked more like a preordained execution. Donovan watched them close, 400 yards. 300. 200. He had no rounds left, no real defense. But he had one final resource, the enemy's mind. He rotated the guns with calm, surgical precision, tracking the lead fighter. He followed it with almost eerie accuracy, maintaining the discipline he would have had with loaded guns. Every movement was designed to send a message. If you press the attack, you die. The German pilot saw it. He saw the twin .50s perfectly aligned with his cockpit. That was enough. He broke formation with a sharp right turn, a primal instinct overriding logic. Donovan couldn't shoot, but in the enemy's mind, he could. The rest of the fighters followed the leader. The attack geometry collapsed. Not because they had evidence of the threat, but because they believed it could exist. The reputation forged just minutes earlier, 21 aircraft downed, had become an invisible weapon. A ghost threat. They're falling back. The belly gunner whispered in disbelief. They're really falling back. And it was true. The German formation scattered. They made no further attack. After losing 21 fighters to a single B-17, to a single tail turret, the cost had become unbearable. The retreat was total. They turned for their bases, leaving Hell's Fury completely alone in the sky, but alive. The main formation reached Augsburg, dropped their bombs, destroyed the factory, and returned through 3 more radar contacts. None of those fighters dared approach Hell's Fury. German communications had already spread the warning. There was a B-17 with a tail gunner who had downed 21 aircraft alone. Avoiding it wasn't cowardice. It was common sense. Hell's Fury touched down at Framlingham at 16:47, 9 hours after takeoff. Donovan climbed out of the turret. Hands steady, eyes clear, no tremor. As if the battle had left no trace. The ground crew surrounded the bomber to assess its condition. 47 bullet holes, 13 cannon hits, One hydraulic line destroyed, rudder cracked. But the plane had returned. Whole. Alive. Murphy, the chief mechanic, inspected the tail. He saw the ammunition boxes completely empty. Every round gone. He found Donovan sitting on the tarmac, a cigarette between his fingers. "You used everything," Murphy said. 2,000 rounds. Every bullet loaded onto the aircraft. "I couldn't afford to waste a single one," Donovan replied. Whitmore arrived shortly after. "How many did he shoot down?" he asked. Murphy checked his notes, crew testimonies, radio interceptions, confirmations from the escort fighters that had finally rejoined the formation. 12 confirmed kills," he said. "4 probable, 3 damaged." Whitmore stared at Donovan for a long moment. "You shot down 12 fighters in a single mission." 19, counting probables and damage," Murphy corrected. "In 4 minutes of continuous fire." The news spread faster than the planes. Before nightfall, every tail gunner in the group wanted to learn what Donovan had done. By the next afternoon, other bomber groups were requesting a briefing. That evening, the 8th Air Force Command sent envoys to question him directly. Major General Frederick Anderson arrived in person. He found Donovan in the barracks, sitting and cleaning his guns as if it were an ordinary evening. After introductions, Anderson asked only one thing. "Can you teach it to the right men?" Donovan explained the requirements. Aim wasn't enough. It demanded a different way of thinking. Gunners who saw attack where others saw defense. Hunters, not targets. "Find them," Anderson ordered. "You're authorized to create a special program. Develop doctrine, training, selection. As of now, you're assigned to training command." Donovan hesitated. "I'd prefer to stay with my crew." "Your crew is alive because of you," Anderson replied. "Now your tactics are needed to save others. What matters more, 9 men or 9,000? The decision was already made. Donovan accepted. And in the next 30 days, what the 8th Air Force would remember as the Donovan Doctrine was born. The revolution of tailgun warfare. Its 5 key principles were: first, seize the initiative. Engage fighters before they completed their attack formation. Second, strike the mine before the metal. The first burst was meant to break will, not necessarily aircraft. Third, concentrated fire. Never spread resources thin when outnumbered. Prioritize one critical sector. Fourth, conserve ammunition through aggression. 30 rounds at the right moment were worth more than 300 wasted too late. Fifth, accept risk. Pure defense doomed gunners. Aggression, paradoxically, saved more lives. Individual risk versus collective survival. For Donovan, the mission always came before the man. The doctrine he developed faced immediate opposition. Traditional gunners called it reckless. Officers feared ammunition waste. Conservative tactics instructors labeled it outright madness. Yet the numbers did not lie. In March 1944, before aggressive tactics spread, the loss rate among 8th Air Force tail gunners averaged 38%. By June 1944, with Donovan's doctrine widely adopted, the rate had dropped to 23%. Same missions, same enemy, different tactics, a 15% reduction in losses. But the kill statistics told the real story. In March, German fighters completed 52% of their planned attack runs against bomber formations. In June, after the introduction of aggressive fire, that rate collapsed to 27%. Tail gunners were disrupting German coordination so effectively that more than half of planned assaults were aborted before reaching firing position. The psychological impact outweighed any single engagement. German pilots began avoiding bombers known for aggressive gunners. Radio interceptions captured commanders' warning. "Stay away from that formation." Reputation had become a weapon. Between March and August 1944, Donovan trained 300 tail gunners. Each underwent 2 weeks of intensive instruction, live-fire exercises, attack simulations, psychological conditioning. The program emphasized mental preparation as much as technical skill. Donovan's motto became a golden rule. "Fear is born when you react." Confidence is born when you act first. Not everyone made it. The doctrine required decisiveness under pressure, tolerance for risk, focus amid chaos. About 30% of candidates failed. They couldn't overcome the defensive instinct, couldn't accept the necessity of attacking. Those who succeeded entered legend. By the end of the war, Donovan graduates were responsible for 43% of all tailgunner kills in the European theater. They invented their own techniques, adaptations, innovations. The doctrine evolved beyond its creator. Some examples: Sergeant Thomas Bailey shot down 16 fighters in his first 4 missions. Sergeant Robert Chen survived 27 missions without serious damage to his position. Aggressive fire didn't just increase kill counts. It increased survival. German pilots learned to recognize the signs: early long-range bursts, sustained barrages, tracers slashing through the center of their formation. At the sight of these indicators, they immediately broke off the attack. The risk of facing an aggressive gunner outweighed the value of a kill. By the summer of 1944, Luftwaffe training manuals contained sections dedicated to aggressive American gunners. The recommended countermeasure was clear: avoid. Seek easier targets. Don't attack anyone showing active defense. The psychology had reversed. Now the Germans feared the Americans. Donovan's combat career ended that March 6th. He never flew offensive missions again, dedicating himself entirely to training. But his influence spread far beyond his 12 confirmed kills. Conservative estimates credit his doctrine with saving 300 bombers and 3,000 crew members. The cumulative effect of preventing German attacks extended across the entire air campaign. After the war, military historians analyzed his tactics. The principle of aggressive defense entered the air doctrines of multiple nations: the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and even post-war Germany, which acknowledged the effectiveness of the method. Donovan's concept was not confined to bombers. Escort fighters, ground attack aircraft, naval units, wherever there were defensive positions, his principles found application. Yet Donovan himself returned to Boston, worked in construction, and maintained complete silence about the war. When journalists tracked him down in the 1960s, he refused interviews. "I did what had to be done," he said. "Like 300 other gunners. They're the real story." Not everyone agreed. One of his men, Sergeant Thomas Bailey, recounted Donovan's impact in 1972. Before him, surviving meant hiding, becoming small targets, conserving resources. "Mike taught us that surviving means making the enemy afraid to attack you. It sounds simple. It changes everything." The numbers confirmed Bailey's words. In 1945, the 8th Air Force conducted a detailed analysis comparing bomber losses before and after the introduction of the aggressive tailgunner doctrine. May 1944, average losses of 14 bombers per 1,000 sorties. August 1944, average losses of 8 bombers per 1,000 sorties. Same targets, same German defenses. The reduction was 43%. The difference? Gunners who fired first. Captured German records offered the enemy's perspective. Luftwaffe post-mission reports from the summer of 1944 repeatedly mentioned the new aggressiveness of American gunners. A June 1944 report stated, "American tail gunners employ new tactics. They engage formations during approach with sustained fire, causing psychological disruption of attack coordination. Recommendation: avoid direct rear approaches. Use high-angle diving attacks from 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock positions." Applying the recommendation was not simple. High-angle diving attacks required different training, different coordination, different risk assessment. Many German pilots failed to adapt. Those who tried still encountered aggressive gunners and belly turrets. Donovan's doctrine had now spread to all defensive positions on American bombers. By August 1944, the effectiveness of German fighters against American bombers had dropped 63% compared to January of the same year. Many factors contributed: better escort fighters, more effective bomber formation training, strategic targets on German oil production. but an internal Luftwaffe analysis attributed 28% of the decline solely to the aggressive tactics of American gunners. Donovan never learned these numbers, never saw the German analysis, never fully understood the scope of his influence. He died in 1998, at 76. The Boston Globe obituary mentioned the Distinguished Service Cross, 16 years of work in construction, his wife Margaret, and their 3 children. One paragraph noted his wartime service as a tail gunner in the 8th Air Force and the development of tactics that had changed aerial combat. That paragraph did not mention the 12 kills in 4 minutes, did not speak of the 300 gunners he trained, did not explain how 3,000 lives had been saved, nor how a boy from South Boston had transformed air combat doctrine, influencing every nation that would study his methods. Donovan's funeral drew just 17 people, mostly family, 2 wartime comrades, no honor guard, no 21-gun salute. Only a quiet ceremony at St. Augustine's Cemetery. The priest officiating had no knowledge of March 6, 1944. He didn't know the Donovan Doctrine. He didn't know he was burying a man who had changed the course of the air war. But the other tail gunners knew. Every veteran of the aggressive training program knew. The night before, they had gathered in a South Boston bar, raised their glasses, told stories, remembered the man who taught them to fire first and intimidate the bastards trying to kill them. Bailey, now 74, gave the toast. Mike Donovan never thought he was special, he was just a kid doing his job. But his job saved 3,000 of us. Every bomber that came home because the German fighters broke off the attack. Every gunner who finished his tour because he learned to be aggressive instead of defensive. Every mission that succeeded because the enemy was too afraid to engage. This is Mike's legacy. Not 12 kills. 12,000 lives. The Donovan Doctrine remains standard in modern aerial combat training. Fighter pilots learn the principles of aggressive engagement. Gunners on transport aircraft study psychological intimidation tactics. Even modern missile defense systems incorporate the concept of early engagement to disrupt enemy coordination. March 6, 1944, lasted 4 minutes. 1 tail gunner, 12 enemy fighters. The moment defense became offense. When reaction became action. When a boy from South Boston proved that survival doesn't come from hiding, but from making the enemy too scared to fight. Michael Donovan fired 2,000 rounds, destroyed 12 planes, saved 3,000 lives, and changed the war forever. Not because he was special, but because he refused to wait for death to find him. He went hunting first. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us preserve these stories. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We honor the courage of these men by remembering their names. Thank you for keeping their stories alive.